If you've ever wondered what it takes to hold executive legal roles, then this one's for you. Today, I'm delighted to be joined on Lessons I Learned in Law by Carolyn Herzog, who I've followed and kept track of her career moves over the last decade or so, where she's held some really interesting positions and been in companies that have gone like that. But she's currently Chief Legal Officer at Elastic, and she's based in the west coast of the US. So Elastic is a global tech company that focuses on search and AI, and it's used by and helps global organizations make sense of their data. So it helps them harness that data, and it's really leaned in heavily. It's a business built around AI and generative AI. She stepped into something quite new. It's a fully distributed organization, and it has been set up that way by design since 2012. Now, before Elastic, Carolyn's held chief legal officer roles at Arm and Symantec, so has really seen businesses that have been on the up and grown at scale, and have put her at the center of technology, cybersecurity, and risk around those areas. So it was great to hear her views on what that landscape looks like right now and what it means for Elastic and other organizations, and how to future-proof your career as a lawyer. Our three big lessons are fantastic and human for someone in her role, and really gives an impression as to how she steps up as a leader. And we touch on why she thinks that curiosity is the thing that's going to help lawyers stand out from the crowd going forward, and is becoming more and more important, and something that everyone should be looking to lean into. So this is a brilliant conversation, packed full of loads of practical tips and things that you can apply in building that executive presence. So let's get into it. Today's episode of Lessons I Learned in Law is proudly brought to you by Wordsmith AI. Now, Wordsmith AI is redefining how in-house legal teams automate routine tasks and repetitive tasks like contract review and internal requests, so that you and your legal team can work strategically and work on proactive projects. They're an Edinburgh-based startup. They're one of the UK's fastest growing startups, and at a really exciting time in their growth journey. They're showing how technology, AI, and talent as a combination can really build the modern in-house legal team. So find out more by heading over to wordsmith.ai. Hi, Carolyn. Welcome to Lessons I Learned in Law.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. It's taken, we've had a few technical hitches on my end there. We've got there.
On my end too.
I've had a break from recording, so I thought there was a little bit of ring rust on my end. But lovely to chat with you, and looking forward to the conversation. And as I said before we started recording, someone that I've known of and followed through your time in previous roles. So excited to unpick your career and get started. But I've given a brief introduction as best as I can, and an overview of your position and previous roles held. But if we could start, if you could just give a bird's eye view of your current role, the function, and the business that you're working in.
Sure. Well, I am the Chief Legal Officer and Board Secretary for Elastic NV. Elastic is a Dutch-headquartered company, and we're traded on the New York Stock Exchange. So a very global company, and I think that's something that's been a theme throughout my career. I'm sure we'll talk through that, but I really do enjoy the multinationals. I have an amazing team. Elastic is distributed by design, which means, and the company started this way, which means my team is really all over. And I really enjoy this because I truly can find the best talent wherever they are, and really trust people as professionals to do what they need to do. We don't count hours here. We don't clock in. We don't clock out. We really try to do the work wherever we are. And it does add a little bit more of a personal kind of touch. You can see you're working today with me in my home office and all my tchotchkes all around. Elastic is a platform offering. So we are an open source company, started in search and the power of search AI, and expanded into observability and security. We help our customers find the information that they need in real time, and protect that information as well. So I feel like it's important work. It's a great company and a great team.
Cool. We'll look forward to hearing more about the distributed model. But by the sounds of it, it's a business that's, with everything that's going on in the world of tech and AI right at the forefront within the search capabilities. How are you seeing the business evolve over the last few years? It must be some pace of change.
I mean, I think I've like working in tech now for really almost my entire career. I often say that, I think that the lawyers that work in technology are not just adaptable to change. We might be a little bit addicted to it, and maybe we should just admit that. So the pace of change is quick. And also, having worked in cybersecurity for the majority of my career, cyber is always changing. If you're not keeping up with the malicious actors, you are absolutely behind. So there's always something new. And I really enjoy that. And I particularly enjoy it when you have the right team around you who are curious and leaning in and constantly asking, did you know and did you hear? Because
Mhm.
there's too much going on that you would possibly know everything. And of course, in the world of AI has been around for a long time, but the surge of generative AI has really changed the way we're thinking about what AI can do in the world. It's changing our careers in legal, it's changing everybody's career. And
Mhm.
so it's a pretty exciting time. It's also a really important time for the lawyers to lean in and to think about, well, what are the potential repercussions? Because if you're not protecting against the future, you're going to be too far behind.
Mhm. Yeah, it's opportunity threat. I think
Mhm.
we're definitely right on the precipice, on the cusp of that. Um, Great, and the this like so. Amsterdam headquarters. So is it founder in Amsterdam, and then like what are the ties to Europe? 'Cause you obviously Silicon.
So
So.
one of our founders is from Amsterdam and sits on our
Mhm.
board. There were four founders. They actually started in the UK,
Mhm.
but not British either. So one of our founders is also Israeli. He currently lives in the UK again. Also sits on our board and is our chief technology officer. So again, a very international group
Mhm.
that found each other and innovated, and it's pretty cool. I think all the stories in tech, where sometimes you see these really big tech companies or these things that just seem like they naturally happen. It happened with somebody's idea in their kitchen, or as they talk about Silicon Valley in their garage, and it's pretty cool to understand the origins.
Yeah. And did you ever inheriting? So you joined 2019, in, stepped into a business that was distributed by design. Is that something? Did you have prior experience of that, or like remote,
Well,
that
I
type
think
of remote working?
yeah, we all experienced COVID. So before
Yeah.
COVID, absolutely not. I was always in the office. We were very much an office culture at ARM. We were very much an office culture at Symantec. At ARM, because our headquarters were in Cambridge in the UK. Most of the executives were in San Jose because that's where most of our customers were, and our customers
Hmm.
being our partners, either in the US or in Asia. But we did travel quite a lot. So we were in the office and we traveled quite a lot. And then COVID hit, and I think surprised all of us, right? How well we could work. There were things that were hard when you see your colleague kind of crouching on the floor on their kid's toddler bed trying to get their work done. And some people had a nice office space. There were definitely different trials. And I do think that made me a more empathetic leader as well. But it has been a really positive experience working in a distributed company where it's even the playing field. Everybody's working in a distributed role. Everybody's responsible for themselves. It really pushes the professionalism
Hmm.
and the accountability. And you can talk a lot about, well, what are you accountable for? What's the outcome you're trying to achieve, rather than how many hours were you in the office?
Hmm. Yeah. Excellent. Well, we'll jump on and move into your lessons. So, if you could talk us through the first lesson that you've learned in your career.
Sure. I mean, and it's interesting because you've asked for three lessons. And for me, the first lesson is really the lesson that I always call out.
Right.
Slightly, embarrassing because we all learn our lessons, I suppose, through the hard way. But I was actually working in the UK,
Hmm.
and I was pretty new in my role. I was working in an environment where I would not say the legal department was seen as a real champion of the business. The leader there had a lot to complain about with the team. In fact, the first time I called him, I said, "How's the team doing?" He said, "Fire everybody and start over." And I kind of cheerfully said, "Well, absent that, what else could we do?" And it proceeded. I'd moved my young kids, my husband over, and I was so excited to be living there and having this role covering Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And it was quite miserable at times. I would get like these very long streaming complaints and just a lot of sort of anger towards the team. It was not just my team, but it was others. And there was one day when I got a particularly scathing message, and he'd sent it to my boss, and my boss, forwarded it on to me, and I wrote back, and I wrote a very long message about why every single point was wrong. I mean, I articulated my arguments, and I was going to defend this team, and I went home, and I got a message from him, and it said, "Perception is reality," which I was already a little hyped up, and then that made me really mad. So,
Hmm.
as we spouses tend to do, I got home and then, got upset with my husband because it must be his fault that all this happened. Poor guy. And this was one where I commuted. I took a train and a bus, and it took a while to get to work. And by the time I got back to the office the next morning, I had simmered through all my fuming and thought, "Oh, he's right. Perception is reality." That it's if somebody feels the way they feel, it doesn't really matter whether you're right and they're wrong.
Hmm.
The truth is usually somewhere in between, but the point is you have to bring people along.
Hmm.
And you can't influence people, and you can't change hearts and minds if you're not willing to understand where somebody else is at.
Hmm.
And you can think that they're wrong. There's nothing, that stops you from doing that. But if you don't understand how they are seeing things, you can't possibly try to understand or change their mind.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that to me is the biggest lesson I have ever learned. I really try to practice it, and live it. It's not easy because let's face it, lawyers really like to be right, and I am squarely in that category. But
Mhm.
I'm not gonna convince anybody if they think I'm wrong.
Yeah, just selling, got to sell the idea, right? But so where did you, how did you take a step back then and try and change that perception? Like what steps
One
does someone
is,
take that?
yeah, my team will always tease me, but I like to say that feedback is a gift when it's
Yeah,
given with good intentions. And
right.
so you need to ask for feedback. And I really made a campaign to ask for feedback, and not just from that particular leader, but from everybody else who were my peers working for that person.
Hmm.
And I went around to every single person and asked genuinely, how are we doing?
Hmm.
What are your challenges? How can we help you? And I really did learn the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there's opportunity in that. And I really try to help people feel safe to say that, if you ask for the feedback, it's on that other person to give it to you. And if you keep asking for it, it gets more comfortable. So
Hmm.
a feedback tour, and then people, the Brits sort of laughed at me because they said, "How come you just keep coming in and smiling and waving?" And I recognized it wasn't about me. It wasn't something I should take personally. It was about that person's perception, and it was my job to change it. In speaking with other people, I knew that there were some things that were going really, really well and that
Hmm.
were greatly appreciated. And then there were things that where we thought we were doing well, but other people didn't see it. And so part of my job as a leader is to advertise what my team is doing and to be
Hmm.
their spokesperson, and to also help guide when there's things that we could do better.
Hmm.
There's things where people, if they don't feel safe on the risk, I have to be able to convince them like that's on me. And so if you need to lean on me to take the risk and to provide the direction. Ultimately, I should be the one that takes that heat. And so let's align on that, and let's be open for debate and continually ask for feedback.
Hmm. Yeah. It's music to my ears that you're saying that.
Mhm.
It's something we're talking about to our team all the time in recruitment. Obviously, like you can't convince. There's no convincing someone if they're not interested in a candidate or an interview hasn't gone well. Like you can fight as much as you want or think the other person is making a making the wrong decision or not a decision you would make. But it's the horse is bolted, and I think you're more likely to get resistance and further pushback, and someone cement their position if that's your starting point. What
Yeah. Well, you mentioned earlier your kids are young and mine are older, but when you go through the teenage years, it
Mhm.
comes out even stronger. It is, I would say, it tried my leadership to a point of potential combustion, and when you have teenagers, you're definitely wrong all the time. And there's
Yeah.
things that you really want them to do because you think it's good for them, and you have to find a way through that. But being wrong consistently is a trial.
Yeah. Yeah. How much, like in your career and as your kids got older and went through those changes, like how much of it have you applied to your leadership style or your presence and your role? Like, has there been lessons you've taken from that as a mother, as a parent?
So many lessons. I mean, I think when I look back, I mentioned my husband stayed home with our kids, and I was definitely one of those people that was, nervous about everything. I had great bosses, really good bosses that helped me in my career and that were kind to me and that would always tell me, in an annual review, you work too much. But I didn't give myself permission sometimes to just be present. I was always worried about what was next. And I think going through COVID and going through the teenage years, I also tragically lost a sibling,
Mm.
when we moved to California. And I think the hard stuff makes you a more empathetic person and a more empathetic leader. You really realize um, when you need help
Mm.
and when you need to prioritize just looking your kids in the eyes and saying, yeah, was it a rough day? Let's talk about it. You can come back to your email. And I have found that giving people permission to do that and to take that time has has really made a difference, because I had great bosses, people that were very supportive of me, but I needed actually somebody to give me permission.
Mm.
I only know that now in hindsight. And I do find that everybody goes through a hard time sometimes. Certainly, we all experienced that together with COVID,
Mhm.
and being able to just pause and see how somebody is doing and seeing what they need, how you can help them succeed,
Mhm.
including if that means taking a little break, has been a real powerhouse tool in the toolbox, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, really good in the moment. It sounds like as well, just to be able to take that step back and have the perception, um,
Mhm.
which is yeah. What how did your kids adapt to moving to the UK? What ages were they when you moved?
They were little and they adapted wonderfully.
Uh,
They were 3 and 5 when we moved.
okay,
And so one was in preschool, one was just starting kindergarten. They went to the American school in London, which I still say was the happiest place on earth. It was just,
nice.
um, I was so excited to be there. I love, I think London is just this melting pot of people from everywhere, and you get to meet so many interesting people. And then you have a long weekend from London, and everything is international. And you're like, we should go to Budapest this weekend. So I think the
Yeah,
kids were great travelers, great explorers. Um, really enjoyed their time there.
yeah, nice. Good, yeah, great life experience.
Mhm.
And back to the lesson. What's the how do you encourage others to seek feedback from yourself? Is that that line that that individual fed to you about perception? How have you then adapted your own approach to giving feedback? Do you volunteer it, or are you waiting until you're asked? How does it work?
Probably a bit of both, to be fair. And I really believe in giving feedback in the moment. I think if you give feedback 6 months later, nobody's going to be able to contextualize what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think feedback should be kind. It should never, like I said, feedback's a gift as long as it's given with good intention. So you always have to check your intentions and saying, am I providing this feedback because I really genuinely care about the success of this person and I really want to see them do well.
Mm-hmm.
And you do have to gauge people to see whether or not they're open to feedback. We talk about it a lot as a leadership team and as a whole team, and say, like that it's an important element of your career development to ask people for feedback. I do a survey across our business partners every couple of years, not to overwhelm people. Nobody wants another survey, but making sure that I ask for feedback, and that helps inform. We do OKRs for our team to try and set the vision and mission. It helps to inform the direction and see, like, oh, there's something that we're being asked for that we haven't addressed yet. And I really try to ask questions rather than just
Mm-hmm.
tell,
Mm-hmm.
and make it safe. I think also by being a little vulnerable. I certainly don't think I'm perfect,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't expect anybody else to be perfect either. So feedback and offering feedback and asking for feedback is all part of a process of self-improvement. You don't always have to agree. I also share with people, like, look, you can get feedback and ask for feedback, and you don't have to agree with the person, but I would ask that people digest it a little bit and think about it and think if there's any element that connects with you.
Yeah. So deliberate communication style, right? It's everything with a pause and waiting. And do you feel is it a skill? Is it a skill lawyers are? Have you seen any lawyers that are naturally inclined to seek that feedback without prompting or without having gone through that type of lesson?
Oh yeah, I do. I think there's plenty that don't as well, and it shows in their experience. But I've seen loads of lawyers who are really good listeners. First of all, I think, as a profession, we're really good in crisis. We're really good when things are hot, and we're the people that others will come to when there's a problem and they just don't know what to do with it. And sometimes you'll meet the lawyers that are like, that's not my job. I'm the lawyer. I'm going to give you legal advice. And other people that are willing to listen and say, well, let's work on that together. And I think that's what really changes perceptions about the role that we can play as business partners and moving things forward. We're often a safe place to land. You get lots of jokes about, oh, you're going to be in trouble if you go to the legal department, or you're the team that writes contracts and keeps me out of jail. But the more you open yourself up for that feedback and for having conversations and being a safe place to land, a bit like a parent, so that people can just say, look, this is really bothering me and I don't know what to do with it. We have a lot of connections across the company. We really know how to network and find the people that can help get things done.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. And we'll move on to lesson 2.
Just going to pause for a couple of seconds and say that today's episode is brought to you in partnership with Wordsmith AI. The Wordsmith AI is redefining how in-house legal teams work and operate, and how they automate repetitive tasks like contract review and other internal queries, and fielding those internal requests that are repetitive and can clog up how a legal team works. It allows in-house legal teams, frees up time to work on more strategic projects proactively. They're based in Edinburgh, so it's close to my heart, and they're one of the fastest growing legal technology providers globally. And they're really redefining how you can take technology and people and talent and transform the way that a business operates. So check them out at wordsmith.ai.
Well, lesson 2 is a little bit along those lines, which is that, we often are told in the law that sort of things are black and white, and there's very few things that are black and white. In fact, we live very firmly in the gray zone. And so there is, you may be presented with something and the immediate gut reaction may be, no, you can't do that. But I think the answer is really about, what is the solution? How can we do this together? How can we navigate to say there's a way through, and there's risk factors that you have to weigh, and create that mutual accountability to say, I'm going to advise you on what the risk factors are from a legal perspective. Here's what I've seen happen in business, because we also really know a lot of people in our industry and have bench strength around that. Conflicts of laws, to me, I talked about the international piece, is so interesting, because complying with a law in one country may be slightly breaking the law in another. And, you really do have to navigate and say, well, what's the most important thing to do here? How do we actually put ourselves forward so that we're trusted by all the people that we care about trusting us, our customers, our partners, the regulators? What is the right thing to do under the circumstances, and navigating? And you can only do that through conversation. You can only do that by really understanding what somebody's trying to accomplish.
And that, like, with that, like with your external counsel, like, is that what type of, how do you work with those lawyers in order to help you find that solution?
So I think it's you're absolutely right in terms of thinking about, well, what is your network of people in the know, and sometimes it's your outside counsel. And I, even in our engagement, letters with our outside counsel, we talk about the relationship and how important the relationship is. I don't want it to be a transactional exchange. I really try to help team members. Sometimes I'm not the one talking to that counsel all the time. It's the person who's the subject matter expert. And I'm always asking, are they making you better? Are they challenging you so that you know how to do it next? And then you're going to bring them the next question because you really have that trusted relationship. Are they sending you articles or information or bringing you in to talk on panels because you are the subject matter expert and they're learning as much about our business and what's happening and the risks that we're facing as much as we're learning about the deep expertise in law that they're learning. So the outside counsel is one network. Organizations like the Association of Corporate Counsel that we met from and being on the board there and having the network of other in-house counsel is immensely important. We talk a lot about, when you're dealing again with that conflict conflict of laws and how to navigate. Sometimes you just want to find out what everybody else is doing. Sometimes people are deeper in that and saying, well, if I can just stay in the herd and do what everybody else is doing and understand why we're doing it this way, then I can navigate and pivot if there's something that's riskier for my business. But there's such tremendous power in having that network that are working in your industry or that are the experts in certain areas, whether it's data privacy or employment law. I always say employment law is the least intuitive because it's so culturally driven. You know, my contractual relationship with the company in the US is so different than how somebody in France sees it. And it is a very different relationship and it's not intuitive to somebody who hasn't grown up there. That's why I also really advocate for living and working in other countries. You get such a different depth of perception.
Different people. And within, from the organizations like ARM that you've previously worked in and then moving to Elastic and the distributed model, but not that makes this any different, but how do you identify like the priorities or the people as a, perhaps not at this strategic level, the exec level, but someone more junior, how do they identify the stakeholders that they need to go and learn those, like who the experts are internally within the business and who to ask the right questions of? Like, how do you encourage your team to do that and build those relationships?
That's a great question. So when I joined companies, in the last few companies, as an executive, you really start your 90-day plan, right? What's your 90-day plan? What are you going to accomplish by 90 days? And you set that out and you speak with your CEO or you speak with the other execs around that. I actually believe that is an important tool for everybody that is joining because people really need to be able, they'll start, drinking from the fire hose, as they say, or I like to say, just standing under the waterfall with your mouth open and everything is just coming at you. And you do need that network of experts. Like I go directly to marketing first because we struggled getting onto this, this show today. I joke that when the television got more than one remote, I no longer knew how to use it, but I consider myself a technology lawyer. I have worked in technology my entire career. So I go straight to marketing and I say, okay, tell me what the company does. Help me understand this. And I probe there because marketing can usually translate from engineering and sales and everybody else to get the pitch out there. So I really want to deeply understand what does the company do. And there's usually somebody, whether it's the CMO or somebody else who can really give me that pitch and give me that time to digest. I spend the time to try and get to know the team. I think it's really important to be open about your leadership style and to let people know what they can expect of you, to know what your boss's priorities are. It's really important for me that, if my boss says, I want you to meet these 6 people, or even if they don't tell you, you should ask, and have that written out in your 90-day plan so that you can report back and say, I really prioritize this part of understanding this week, and this is what I've done. I've got a gap here. Can you help me with that connection? And I also think about that from outside the company. Are there people that are, when I joined ARM, for instance, I came from a security company, the biggest cybersecurity company, and it's, a SOC and SOC was a secured operations center. And then when I went into semiconductor, it's a system on a chip. So the acronyms were all completely different. They were speaking another language. There was so much about semiconductor that I did not understand. And I really needed to spend time with people to weed me in. I wasn't going to understand, how to make a chip or how to design a chip the way that an engineer would, but I needed to know what was going on in the business and where the pain points were and what were our priorities from a legal team to move the business forward.
Yeah, it's, I think I agree with what you said about anyone going in, whatever is same as having values and principles, and the points of contact will change throughout your career as you grow and develop. But building that internal and external network, I think, is invaluable, and even more so with as knowledge becomes a bit more commoditized. I think that's what sets the high functioning people apart, and will continue to do so.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Although it's interesting because like there's the new people, but then there's the people that become your pillars, right? That you're just
yeah,
like, I really am struggling with this issue. This is somebody I'm going to call. I have a few people on my team now that I've known for 20 something years. And it really changes the dynamic because I need the knowledge from the newer people, but I have the reliance on the people that I just know how they work. So they spend
okay,
less time with them on certain things, more time on others. But there's always those pillars, whether it's outside counsel, and there's quite a few of those, or people that I've networked with or known for many years that I still call for advice.
yeah, nice. On that, in hiring into that model, everything being you could hire anywhere, and how do you know in that position? I've uncovered every I've unturned every stone. I know I've cast the net wide enough, because it's yeah, it's a great opportunity to have that, to fish in that such a wide pool, but also can be I find can almost be too much when we're working on a remote position or somewhere that can be based anywhere.
Based anywhere, it's hard, and I think it's a real challenge for talent, people today.
Yeah.
And of course, the use of AI has been a great tool, but it also can weed out, the gem that you're not seeing. And
Hmm.
we have a really tremendous talent team that we work with,
Hmm.
and and they are able to do, they really try to understand us. I think, again, do you understand your audience? Do you understand what you're looking for? As a leader, we also really try to find out where are our gaps. Like, we all
Hmm.
have strengths and we all have things that are just not going to be the things that we're super strong at. So as we think about our growth trajectory, as we think about where do we want to go, we think about what are we missing, and we really try to highlight and make sure that our job descriptions are open enough that we get a diverse slate of candidates, but also really hone in on what do we absolutely need for this role, and what's an okay thing to have. And you end up with a very unique mix of people, particularly because we're creating kinds of roles that maybe didn't exist before. We're becoming much more operational.
Hmm.
And I do think legal operations is the secret sauce to the success of any legal department today.
Hmm.
Are we being efficient? Are we being thoughtful, and really prioritizing the work that's most important? As we look at the power of AI and how that's changing the way we work, we really have to reconsider our value proposition again, and to
Hmm.
say, to help the company scale, where do we need to spend our time? We have limited resources. What do we need? And then there's also just I like to work with with nice people. And I think when you get the culture of the company and the temperament of the company, we're fast paced, we like to get things done, we're hard driving, but at the same time we're kind and courteous. And it makes a difference to feel like you work with people that you're not afraid to ask a question when you don't know, or that will help you along the way, or that you can just enjoy their company. So I think we have really prioritized on this team. I don't know if you've read any of the Malcolm Gladwell books, but I think they're quite fascinating. He wrote Tipping Point, and there's elements about kind of, you just know sometimes when you've met somebody, you say, I would really like to work with this person. I'm
Yeah.
obviously not interviewing everybody on our team, but I have found, as we're bringing in new talent, I mean, we also, as a distributed company and working in the way that we do, like, we get introduced to people's families right away, whether that's
Hmm.
your, furry family or a new
Yeah.
child. You really do get more intimate and more personal in that way. And that adds a lot. You get to know sort of where this person's priorities are and what do they need to be successful and be happy.
Hmm.
And historically in the law, maybe we didn't talk a lot about being happy, but I think
Yeah.
happy people are more innovative.
Hmm.
Happy people are more willing to give that extra bit when you need it of them, and if you treat them well, then they get their downtime too. So it's that reliance on people that are just happy to be here.
Hmm. Yeah, it's good energy. It's contagious, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, that sounds good. Thanks for sharing that. Um, we'll move on to lesson 3. If you could share that and run us through it.
Well, and a lot of it has to do with some of the things we've talked about before. But when you're giving advice, I think as outside counsel, you can give advice and say, "Here's what the law says. Go on and do with it what you will." When you're in house, you actually have to make it work. You actually have to follow that next step. So I talked about the importance of legal operations. I think we all have to be more operational. You have to help people with the how. It has to be actionable. You have to make sure that you see it through. You can't just drop a bomb and walk away. And so that's something that I think is really critical to success. You can't dump and run. You need to bring people along, get that perception going as well. You can't just say you can't do that. You got to say like, well, let's figure this out together. How could we do this? And you have to make sure it's executable.
Yeah, it's. I think that's the in-house lawyer, right? And knowing we touched on knowing the right people to ask internally within the business and what their priorities are. And can you just ask about the sort of legal ops side? You've held like various executive roles. It's something that's, I think, in Europe and the UK has still got a lot of growth in order to catch up with where it sits within the US, but it's something that's marketed or is got the terminology around it now and a more sophisticated outright function. But to what extent through the course of your career do you feel has it always been a thing? Has things changed in that period of time in terms of how
No,
important
it's
ops are?
changed. Yeah, it's changed a ton. In fact, I remember I was, already a VP by the time I met my first legal ops leader
Right.
and didn't really understand the role or the function and then thought it was the most brilliant thing ever.
Right.
And I'm actually still friends with that person today. And that person came at the role, it was a finance person who came into the role and
Okay.
said, and was really about budget and efficiency. And I think one of the things that's very interesting about legal ops is that you do get people with various different backgrounds. When you think about the areas that you really want to manage, I met somebody else in legal ops through another company who was really focused on knowledge management. How do you actually share information? How do you make sure people get the information that they need? Because you don't want to keep going to outside counsel with the same question every time. You want to be able to get that question. And then how do you actually develop other people? How will people know if maybe I'd be interested in being a product lawyer, or maybe I'd like to do more IP work if they don't ever get access to it? And so there's so much with legal operations that's about managing the budget. It's a really important thing. If you're going to get credibility with your leadership, you better manage a budget and show the impact of that budget. You want training. We have lawyers that have to have continuing legal education, but there's also the questions of like, well, where are we going and what do people need to learn to get there? Because you can have the right team today. It won't be the right team tomorrow if you're not training them and getting them ready for what's next and keeping people curious. So sharing knowledge is what's happening in the company, what's happening in this team, what's happening with this business piece, where are we going next, really making sure that we share that across, and tools and systems where lawyers are probably traditionally late adopters in terms of technology, but technology has rapidly become an essential tool. And while I still may write notes to help me remember things, if we're not using AI, if we're not using contracts management systems and redlining systems and various chat functions, we're going to be very behind the times.
Yeah, it's as you said, sometimes behind the times, but I think now it's I needs must, and future proofing your career, which I think I've sort of read and seen you speaking about previously. It's super important on that. But I would love to talk more. I'm conscious of our time because of the delayed start on the tech side around responsible AI. But if you had tools or you could point people in the right direction in terms of reading around that space and what Elastic are doing around that would be fantastic, and we can share that in the show notes.
So I think we should all not only just accept but embrace that AI is changing the way we work. It is, when you think back about the Industrial Revolution and all the things that changed with machines, I had a CEO that once said, the world doesn't need more ditch diggers. You now have a machine to dig a ditch and they can do that much faster. And you didn't lose jobs. There were new and different jobs that evolved from that. There's so much fear about, is my job going away? And I encourage people to think more about, look at what AI can do for you, because if you are not using AI, you are going to be a dinosaur. I often say that, AI is not replacing humans. It's replacing humans that aren't using AI. So we have to embrace that and understand that, but also do that with foresight and knowledge, and be careful about the potential negative impact. And I think there's so much happening on the regulatory front. We're going to pause regulation in the US. Now we're going to go into regulation, but have it more state run. You've got the EU AI Act. You've got laws in Korea. You've got laws in various countries that are running along similar themes. So I think the framework thinking about responsible use of AI is really critical for a company like Elastic, who is founded in AI and who is in the business of data effectively. We're helping customers manage their data. The data privacy elements by design and default and the security elements by design and default are really a core strength player for us in AI. So if customers can feel, or any individual can feel, that I'm getting actually data that I can rely on, it's accurate and true, I know the origin of that. So really understanding that it's not a hallucination. How do I validate that? From an intellectual property standpoint inside the company, I want to make sure that we're using information that we're allowed to use. We certainly look at the bias and make sure that, bias, and it can be misinterpreted, I think, because I don't think there's any such thing as having no bias. The question is it unfair or illegal bias? Because we may be designing an AI to be biased to look for certain information, and that's perfectly okay. But if it's unfair or illegal in its application, that's where you want to pay attention. And I think it's really important for people to understand that. But there's infinite uses for AI, so many good uses. It's changing medicine. It's changing the way we work every day. And I encourage, my kids are really hesitant, believe it or not. I thought they would be full in on it.
Really?
But I think it's an exciting time, and I encourage people to get engaged and get involved and really understand it.
Yeah, it's good advice. Good last piece of advice to end on. As I said, I'm conscious of your time. I'm wrapping up with a different question. I prepared the podcast and book recommendations, but Global General Counsel or Chief Legal Officer, the biggest of the biggest prize awarded to Carolyn or to your team. What's your walk-on song to receiving your award for a bit of fun? You're a music scholar, right, by background?
Yes,
so
I studied music, French and music, very practical. My parents are just happy I'm employed. The walk-on song's easy for me. There's only been one Queen of Soul, and that's Aretha. So respect, absolutely.
Nice, love it.
Yeah,
that'd be good. That'd be banging out the sound system for sure. Well, I really appreciate your time and sharing those lessons. Brilliant, and some amazing stories and really practical stuff for people to apply, which I think stand you in good stead regardless of developments over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And yeah, it's been great to chat and take the time. So thank you for bearing with the tech at the start and giving up your time generously.
Well, it's a very nice way to start my day. Thank you so much.
Nice to speak. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you.
I'd like to say a big thank you to our sponsor, Wordsmith AI, for sponsoring today's episode. As a legal tech company, Wordsmith AI share our belief that great legal teams can take amazing tools and transform the way that in-house legal teams work and operate. So to find out more about Wordsmith, head over to wordsmith.ai. So that wraps up another episode of Lessons I Learned in Law, powered by Harriet Brown In-House Legal Recruitment. Now, I share these stories each week to help lawyers of all levels, and both in private practice or working in-house. And it doesn't matter if you're early in your career or you're already leading a team. Learning from your peers or from those who have walked in your shoes before, then this is the show for you. If you find it useful, I would love it if you could share it with your colleagues or share it with your network, or drop us a message just to let us know that you're listening and that you're out there. Feedback really helps us grow the show and take it in the direction that gives the most value to you, our listeners. So until next time, I've been Scott Brown. Thank you.